As we continue our looking into art history and we continue our time in the ancient Mediterranean period, I wanted you to get a little more information about an artifact that is called Tutankhamun's tomb, innermost coffin and death mask. And this is an article about that particular artifact. Now, the fun thing about this is that a lot of you may or may not have heard of Tutankhamun's tomb. Sometimes people refer to this particular king as King Tut. And so in this article, I really liked it because they had a lot of images of the excavation, and it kind of tells about how they came across this particular artifact. So, Tutankhamun's tomb, innermost coffin, and death mask. And this first image is Harry Burton and Howard Carter, and this is at the university. And this is, you see that there's a coffin within a coffin, and you'll hear more about that in the article. Nearly lost to history. Tutankhamun was only the age of 9 when he became the king of Egypt during the 18th dynasty of the New Kingdom, and that was circa 1332 to 1323 BCE. Remember, the little C in front of a date means circa, or in other terms, that means around the time of. His story would have been lost to history if it were not for the discovery of his tomb in 1922 by the archaeologist Howard Carter in the Valley of the Kings. His nearly intact tomb held a wealth of objects that give us unique insights into this period of ancient Egyptian history. And so here you see a little very basic map, and it shows Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, which is kind of funny as you look at the map because we always think of upper equating to north, but in this case, Upper Egypt is more southern to Lower Egypt. And it shows you in red Amarna and Thebes, and you'll see where that comes into play. Tutankhamun ruled after the Amarna age when the pharaoh Akhenaten, Tutankhamun's probable father, they think that he was his father, turned the religious attention of the kingdom to the worship of the god Aten, the sun disk. Akhenaten moved his capital city from the site of Akhenaten, also known as Amarna, in Middle Egypt, far from the previous pharaoh's capital. After Akhenaten's death and the rule of a short-lived pharaoh, and this is an unusual name, Smenkhara, Tutankhamun shifted the focus of the country's worship back to the god Amun and returned the religious center back to Thebes. So I'm going to go back up. So we look and we see how far those two areas are, Amarna and Thebes. Tutankhamun married his half-sister, another unusual name, Ankhesementet, but they did not produce an heir. This left the line of succession unclear. So they're saying because she didn't have a child, they were unsure of who would be the next king. Tutankhamun died at the young age of 18, leading many scholars to speculate on the manner of his death. Maybe a chariot accident, murder by blow to the head, even a hippopotamus attack were possibilities. The answer is still unclear. Tutankhamun's much older advisor and possible step-grandfather, married the widowed, again, very unusual, I have to think about it before I say it, Ankhesementet, and became pharaoh. This is an image of where the tomb was, and you see it's very barren. And this is the Valley of the Kings. During the early 20th century, Howard Carter, a British Egyptologist, excavated for many years in the Valley of the Kings, a royal burial ground located on the west bank of the ancient city of Thebes. He was running out of money to support his archaeological digs when he asked for funding for one more season from his financial backer, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. Lord Carnarvon granted him one more year, and what a year it was. So archaeologists have to have some type of resources to be able to have these large excavations. So they have multiple people, and they have to be able to fund their digs. And so his money had run out, and Lord Carnarvon gave him another year and finances to be able to work. And you can see there are a number of people in this image, and they are digging, just literally digging for artifacts. At the beginning of November 1922, Carter came upon the first of 12 steps of the entrance that led to the tomb of Tutankhamun. He quickly recovered the steps and sent a telegram to Carnarvon in England so that they could open the tomb together. Carnarvon departed for Egypt immediately, and on November 26, 1922, they made a hole in the entrance of the antechamber in order to look in. Carter states, "At first, I could see nothing, the hot air escaping from the chamber causing the candle flame to flicker. But presently, as my eyes grew accustomed to the lights, details of the room within emerged slowly from the mist. Strange animals, statues, and gold. Everywhere the glint of gold." So the antechamber is the area around the inner chamber. So it's outside the inner chamber, but it's still sealed. So when they opened it up, you got to think about all of that air, that stagnant air, had been in there for so many years, and it was causing the air escaping, was causing the flames on the candles to flicker. And then here's the inside, a view of the tomb interior. And you can see it just has all kinds of things. And a lot of people ask, why did the Egyptians bury all of these objects inside a tomb? Because what are they, what's the purpose of that? Why is it in there with the coffin or with the mummy? The task of cataloging the finds was an immense undertaking for the team. Carter spent a decade systematically recording the finds and having them photographed. Can you imagine? A decade is 10 years. And so this is a diagram of what he found. That's a lot of objects. The innermost coffin. Now, this is what the artifact that I really wanted you to pay attention to. Tutankhamun's sarcophagus, which is a box-like stone container, held not one but 3 coffins in which to hold the body of the king. So you might open one and get to another container and open that, and you still didn't have the body. And then you open another one. So there were 3 coffins that held the body of Tutankhamun. The outer 2 coffins were crafted in wood and covered in gold, along with many semi-precious stones such as lapis lazuli and turquoise. The inner coffin, however, was made of solid gold. When Howard Carter first came upon this coffin, it was not the shiny golden image we see in the Egyptian Museum today, or like the one that you see underneath this particular paragraph. In his excavation notes, Carter states it was covered with a thick black pitch-like layer which extended from the hands down to the ankles. So, if you think about it, pitch is almost like tar, and it's just really sticky and like tar. This was obviously an anointing liquid which had been poured over the coffin during the burial ceremony and in great quantity, maybe some 2 buckets full. Okay, so there's the cleaned innermost coffin. Even notice in the gold, if you look very closely on the legs, you see details, even like gold on gold details. And you see the inlaid enamel and stones. And then the next thing is a diagram or an image. It's not a photograph, it's just an image or a depiction of the Egyptian crook and flail. The image of the pharaoh is that of a god. The gods were thought to have skin of gold, bones of silver, and hair of lapis lazuli. So the king is shown here in his divine form in the afterlife. He holds the crook and flail, which we see the image of right above this paragraph, that are symbols of the king's right or given right to rule that kingdom. The goddesses, Nekbet, which is the vulture, and Wadjet, which is the cobra, inlaid with semi-precious stones, stretch their wings across his torso. Beneath these goddesses are 2 more, Isis and Nephthys, etched into the gold lid. And this is the death mask. And you can really see that his beard area, they depicted as braided, and his headdress, very interesting. The death mask, which is the picture we just looked at, is considered one of the masterpieces of Egyptian art. It originally rested directly on the shoulders of the mummy inside the innermost gold coffin. So this is kind of sad to think about, I guess, but if you have the remains of Tutankhamun and they've mummified him, this death mask would be placed on top of his head and shoulders even before he went into that innermost coffin. It is constructed of 2 sheets of gold that were hammered together and weighs 22.5 pounds. Tutankhamun is depicted wearing the striped Names headdress, which is the striped headcloth typically worn by pharaohs in ancient Egypt, with the goddess Nekhbet and Wajet depicted again protecting his brow. He also wears a false beard that further connects him to the image of a god, as with the inner coffin. He wears a broad collar, which ends in terminals shaped as falcon heads. The back of the mask is covered with spell 151b from the Book of the Dead, which the Egyptians used as a roadmap for the afterlife. This particular spell protects the various limbs of Tutankhamun as he moves into the underworld. So when we talked about I mentioned his braided beard. He did not actually have a beard. What happened was when the king, um, he would wear a beard as an attachment. Isn't that interesting? So it was this piece that represented a beard, and it represented it as braided, and it was almost like something that was tied to his chin, like maybe around his head, and he would wear that in formal dress. And then if you look again at the top of this image, on top of the headdress, you see the 2 goddesses that are protecting his forehead. I have always found that the information of Tutankhamun is very, very interesting, and it's amazing to me that the way that the Egyptians of that time were able to produce such beautiful, very, very tedious work and artifacts. If you have any questions, please contact me via email, or you can give me a call at the school.